Good evening, and welcome back to Breathing Space, the quietest corner of the internet. I'm Sam. Hit the follow button now for more bedtime stories and relaxing episodes to help you wind down and drift off to sleep. Tonight, lie back and listen in to part 3 of the relaxing bedtime story, Escape to Sicily. Before we begin, why not take a moment to wind down from the day? Come to a comfortable position and let your eyes gently drift closed. Welcome a deep breath in through your nose, and when you're ready, sigh out through your mouth. Breathe in for 1, 2, and exhale for 2, 1. Inhale for 1, 2, 3, and exhale for 3, 2, 1. Breathing in for 1, 2, 3, and 4, and exhale for 4, 3, 2, and 1. Now, if you're feeling ready, let your mind drift beyond the bounds of your body and allow yourself to be transported to sunny Sicily, where Afia is just beginning another wonderful day. Day broke gently and Afia eased into it as such. It was gone 10 by the time she began sweeping through the ramshackle house she had purchased on a whim. That morning, Afia was determined to take things one step at a time and not bother worrying about issues before she had even encountered them. After an hour or so, there was a knock on the door, if the wooden board propped up against the front door frame could even be called that. Afia lifted the board away and found eyes rather like the ones that had greeted her so warmly in the coffee shop yesterday pouring down into her own. My grandma said you were looking for some help with renovations. As Afia remembered, that wasn't quite what had happened in the coffee shop. In fact, she distinctly recalled turning down the offer of assistance, but, and perhaps the eyes and easy smile had something to do with it, she decided it couldn't hurt to hear the stranger on her doorstep out. She stepped aside and he stooped his head to fit through the doorway. Everyone was surprised to hear that this place finally sold, he said. It's been empty my entire life. I'm Marco, by the way, he smiled. Lovely to meet you, Marco. Afia smiled back, her concentration caught on the sharp line of his jaw. The silence thickened between them as she searched for something else to say, and when it seemed as though the 4 crumbling walls around them could no longer withstand the tension, she finally fumbled through the introduction she had forgotten to make. Afia. I'm Afia, she explained. Afia, Marco said, smiling softly as he tried out the name for himself. Afia was beginning to get the sense Marco knew the effect he was having on her, but before she could decide he was arrogant and cast out the thoughts weaving wildly into a future she knew she would never really be sharing with this abject stranger, Marco cut through the tension himself. What's the plan? He asked, motioning around the space. No plans as of yet, Afia laughed, suddenly feeling rather foolish for having made such a big commitment on a whim. Any dreams? Marco asked, leaning back gently on what might once have been a kitchen counter, careful to ease his weight onto it gently lest it collapse entirely beneath him. If you could have anything, what would you have? He pressed again. I'm not really sure. Probably something different, something new that still honors the old. I like terracotta, Afia said, motioning to the cracked tiles that covered the kitchen floor. I'd like it to be light, maybe with a window nook to read by, a kitchen with a view, and a bedroom with shutters and a balcony. Mostly, I think I'd like it to feel like my own, like nothing anyone else has. I want to know it's mine and that it's exactly how I designed it. Afia smiled to herself. Marco didn't say anything, and suddenly it felt as though she had shared rather a lot. He swept floppy hair away from his forehead, took a moment to survey the property before nodding quietly to himself. That seems like it should be doable, Marco smiled. Come for dinner, he asked. My grandma's cooking, and we can draw up some plans. In the morning we'll come back and get started. I can only help on weekends for the next week or so, but after that I'll be around as much as I can. Afia wasn't sure why Marco would bother to volunteer his free time like that, but as his grandmother set a plate of steaming carbonara down in front of her that night and made sure she had everything she needed, she rather got the sense that in a village like this, people were used to pulling together and even enjoyed it. As the three of them swapped stories and bickered over where to fit the kitchen sink, Afia thought that perhaps this was why London had always felt so lonely. It seemed that people here had no qualms about inviting themselves into your life, and though once she might have thought it invasive, Afia was beginning to understand why the people here all seemed so at ease. They knew each other, they knew themselves, and most of all, they weren't afraid of others coming too close. Afia helped Marco and his grandmother wash and wipe up, promising to have them over for dinner when her own home had a kitchen. She slipped her feet back into a pair of pumps and was surprised to find Marco pulling his own boots back on. Where are you off to? She asked. I'm walking you home. Oh, Afia breathed. There's really no need. I walked home in London all the time. I'm sure I'll manage to find my way here. I don't doubt it, Marco laughed. There hasn't been a crime reported here in nearly 80 years, but that's not really how things are done here. People look after each other. That's kind, but really it's not necessary. Afia made her best attempt at insisting, and Marco smiled politely enough as he held the door open for her with one arm and motioned for her to walk through. I'm afraid I must insist, Marco sighed. My grandmother is nearly 85, and she'll never forgive me if I don't see you back safely. Together they wandered back to her B&B, the streets seeming even quieter than they had before. The silence was comfortable, and when they did speak, they kept their voices low so as not to wake up the few neighbours they had in Paulina. See you tomorrow, Afia, Marco promised as she turned the key in her front door. Thank you for today and for dinner, Afia called as he crossed the street and headed home. Anytime, he smiled before he disappeared around the corner. It was then on Afia to do everything she could to rid the thoughts of wild summer romances, chance encounters, handsome strangers and unexpected love stories that had crept into her mind. This wasn't one of her books, she reminded herself as she got ready for bed that night. It wasn't until she was almost sound asleep that she confessed to herself that life really was beginning to feel like one of the magical stories she had so often escaped into.